Alexa, play Video Kill the Radio Star by the Buggles. Oh wait, I don't have an Alexa. Hi everyone and welcome to Music Theories, where I explain and analyze all topics related to music. Be sure to subscribe for more content, especially if you're a music geek like me. Before I begin, I want to thank you for 100 subscribers. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but to me it really means the world, and I'm so grateful to hit this milestone. I've had so much fun with this channel, and I'm so excited to continue and grow our music-loving community. This video is essentially the finale of my mini-series on music recording and distribution through the years. Please head to my channel to check out the other parts of this series, starting with the phonograph. And holy cow, this was definitely the most interesting and the most difficult video I've made thus far. I went into this project thinking one thing and discovered the complete opposite. So please, if you like this video and this series, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and do me a solid and subscribe if you haven't already, because this one took me a lot of time and research. It would be greatly appreciated. In the previous part of this series, we discussed the rise and decline of the CD, the birth of the MP3, and the steep rise and decline of Napster. I'm going to resume where we left off last time, but before I get into all that, I want to establish what exactly people mean when they say the music industry. You can think of this as the business side of music. This term includes the musicians themselves, but also consists of those who work the behind-the-scenes part of music. This refers to the act of bartering music as a good. It's the act of treating music as a product and establishing businesses and teams to sell that product. These teams are typically in the form of a record label. This includes the production, distribution, sale, and marketing of that product. It also includes all of the factors that are involved in live performances. This industry was established long ago, pretty much right alongside the printing press, which allowed for the distribution and sale of sheet music. I could do a whole separate video on the music industry itself, but all you really need to know for the sake of this video is that the music business and music industry are pretty much one and the same. And you don't need to take a business course to understand what the industry's objective is: to make money. Okay, with that out of the way, let's jump back into our timeline. A very quick recap. CDs dominated sales in the 1990s, making the industry billions of dollars in a decade's time. Napster, a peer-to-peer MP3 file sharing software, was invented by a college student in 1999. Millions of users begin to share music illegally, and CD sales dip for the first time in the year 2000. Big Music sues Napster and wins the case. Napster is shut down in 2001, but music is changed forever. That same year, Apple releases the iPod, and soon after, its flagship software, iTunes. That about covers it, but definitely watch the video if you want the tea. So while Napster was being made illegal, Apple came up with a software that, while it was not free, it was legal and convenient. They launched iTunes in 2003. I did also mention in the previous video that the industry attempted to launch file sharing models that looked quite similar to streaming services now, but lacked the library they needed to be successful. The iTunes store had quite the library. It was relatively unlimited in library size the way that Napster was. One could purchase a single MP3 for only 99 cents. You could also upload the files from your physical CDs to your iTunes account and have all the files as a curated collection in one place. And yes, music piracy did still exist, largely through programs like LimeWire or FrostWire, but the issue there was you ran a high risk of accidentally infecting your computer with viruses and malware. Not to mention, lots of MP3 files were terrible quality, and you'd end up with some random tags in the middle of a crappy audio file. Many felt this wasn't worth the risk, so iTunes ended up being the next best option. In 2002, there was a program called Last.fm in the UK that was designed to build users a music taste profile based on tracks they listened to. This algorithm, called Audio Scrobbler, wasn't necessarily the first of its kind, but it was one of the first done completely by machines, and began a timeline of different platforms that would ultimately lead up to what we have now. In 2005, a service called Pandora was launched. This software's algorithm was programmed similarly, to recommend songs and artists akin to the ones you had liked. Pandora was marketed as personalized radio, and was free with ad breaks every few songs. they did offer a premium feature which allowed you to listen with no ad breaks for $10 per month. Over the next few years, the indie music scene grew with sites like MySpace, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, and eventually YouTube. These platforms allowed unsigned artists to upload their music and gain a significant amount of traction online without the help of a label. Spotify launched in Europe in 2008 with the goal to tackle the ongoing issue of music piracy. They were subscription-based if you wanted ad-free listening, like Pandora, and had a seemingly infinite catalog of artists. The difference between the two is that you could choose what you wanted to hear on Spotify if you paid for it. Pandora chose your music for you and only allowed you to skip songs a limited number of times. In 2011, Spotify relaunched with new international licensing and became available in the US. This was with the help of none other than Sean Parker. Remember him? The entrepreneur that helped launch Napster back in 1999? He saw his opportunity to invest in digital music again and used his connections with major labels in the US to get licensing for American music. Although it wasn't the only music streaming service, it ultimately became the most used because it provided a high-quality listening experience. By 2019, Spotify had 26 million paid subscribers worldwide and 191 million active users total. It didn't take long for the other giants, Apple, Google, and Amazon, to jump on the bandwagon. That same year, Apple Music accounted for 28 million paid subscribers globally. Tidal is probably worth mentioning, though I personally don't know anyone that uses it. This is a more expensive music streaming service that promises to provide the highest quality listening experience via lossless FLAC files instead of AAC and MP3 files if you pay $20 per month. It's also supposed to host exclusive content from artists. As a listener, it really can't get any more convenient than streaming at this point. For $10 a month, you can stream unlimited music on Spotify, make your own playlists, and get great recommendations based on your music taste. But as an artist, it's kind of a nightmare. Legally, music streaming is a giant mess. I'm going to try to break it down as best I can to make it digestible. In general, much of the industry's income is generated by what are called royalties. According to Visual Capitalist, in 2002, CD sales made up 95.5% of the industry's total revenue. That's huge. In the year 2000, physical music sales exceeded $20 billion. This type of revenue is known as mechanical royalties. The other percentage of revenue accounts for performing rights royalties, anytime a song is performed publicly, including on the radio, synchronization rights royalties, anytime a song is used in television, advertisements, or movies. This is also known as music licensing or sync licensing. Print rights royalties, anytime someone purchases the sheet music to a song. Think like schools purchasing music for their chorus and whatnot. As we know, the industry took a big hit with Napster, and music piracy set physical sales on a steady decline. With iTunes, the industry was faced with a massive problem. Many people stopped buying albums because of the competitive pricing on iTunes. Add streaming into the mix, and a lot of people, if not most people, see no value in buying physical copies of music. So, mechanical royalties have taken a gigantic hit. CD sales have gone down 80% in the past decade. The industry had no choice but to come to terms with users choosing affordability and convenience. But could they make up for money lost on these new platforms? Ultimately, yes. Streaming services operate under a pro rata model, which simply means that their payouts are proportional to the number of streams. The rights holders with the most streams make the most money. Makes sense, right? Not always. Let me explain. Let's say there's a money pool from paying subscribers. This money is distributed based on this model. More plays equals greater payout. This becomes an issue when these platforms cannot collect proper data. There's said to be a royalty black box of unpaid money from incorrect data, thought to be somewhere in the millions. It becomes even more complicated when you learn that there are ways to rig this system. In 2019, Jay-Z's streaming service Tidal was accused of attributing false numbers to favored artists like Kanye West and Beyoncé by a Norwegian finance newspaper. The accusation came from a company hard drive that was obtained by these journalists that contained data that supposedly proved they were artificially inflating these artists' numbers. These counterfeit plays were in the millions. So that's money from the pool that should have been distributed to other, likely smaller artists. This, if true, would be straight up fraud. They are still currently under investigation. And other labels absolutely have agreements with streaming services to get the most out of their digital libraries. In 2017, Universal Music Group made a deal with Spotify that restricts non-paying users from the more desirable parts of their artist's catalog. So, for the industry, this works out really well. They're actually able to generate streaming revenue in the billions. At the end of 2018, the RIAA, or as I like to call them, Big Music, reported double-digit growth for the third year in a row from paid subscription services. In 2020, the RIAA reported a total streaming revenue of over $10 billion in the US. This was 83% of their revenue. This is not necessarily related, but interesting nonetheless. The RIAA reported that although physical sales were flat at $1.1 billion, for the first time since 1986, vinyl actually outsold CDs, growing 28.7% in value. It was quite rocky for the music business back in 2000, but overall it seems that the industry really isn't struggling all that much at the hands of music streaming these days. So, who started this idea that the industry was dying? Actually, you may or may not be surprised to know that this isn't the first time that there was a collective panic that music as we know it is dead. This can be traced all the way back to the birth of recorded music on wax cylinders and flat discs. John Philip Sousa was particularly vocal about recorded music destroying the music industry as they knew it, which was strictly live. Then, the recorded music industry panicked when commercial radio began to play music. Additionally, when music television premiered and many young Americans turned to TV to hear music accompanied by videos, the radio industry panicked that radio would be dead. So, it's safe to say that it's possible that this buzz began at the root itself, when they actually were in a panic back at the time of Napster, and it just never really subsided. Labels have since done a great job distracting the masses with the idea that Napster is to blame for killing the music industry. But what's the real problem? And who's really at fault here? I'm sure you've heard the commotion over the past few years about Spotify not paying their artists. One may ask, how is it possible that these artists aren't getting paid when streaming is supposedly bringing in over $10 billion in revenue? Digital Media Finland did a study in 2017 that concluded that the subscription service itself would hold about 30% of the money acquired from paid subscriptions. The rights holders, aka the record labels, would split up to 60% of this money, and the rights holders of the song itself, typically the songwriters, would receive 15 to 20% of that 60% cut. At first glance, it almost seems like this model would favor independent artists, since they wouldn't have to pay out labels. Very quick disclaimer, royalties are extremely complex. Each scenario is completely unique and based on whatever contracts the industry draws up for its clients. That said, as we move forward, keep in mind that when a song is on the radio, a songwriter typically gets the biggest cut of performance royalties, even more than the performer if the performer is not a credited writer. It's hard to put a number on what artists actually make. Spotify isn't exactly transparent with their rates, and the rates themselves depend on the country you're in. But according to this chart on iGroove, the rate in the US is 0.0035 cents per stream. This means that the payout per 1 million plays in the US is only about $3,550. That same number of plays in India would generate roughly $1,400 in revenue. That's only about 0.0014 cents per stream. This isn't enough for an artist to make a living, yet a lot of them are the reason Spotify can function in the first place. They make up the platform. Tom York of Radiohead was a big proponent in this campaign for artists back in 2013, when he called Spotify the last desperate fart of a dying corpse. He accused the company of being gatekeepers for the industry and getting in the way of something better. Unfortunately, the reality is that smaller artists don't have access to the same resources to get even close to the same amount of plays that a top artist on a major label is making. And these days, it's harder than ever to get on a major record label in the first place, since they typically expect that you already have some sort of significant online presence, which creates a catch-22. Not to mention, recording contracts can be super sketchy. More on that another time. The power that big music has to push their preferred artists is unmatched, even in the world of online music. According to data done by the Win Group in 2016, at that time, 3 major labels produced 2/3 of the music consumed in America. Spotify made things even worse in 2019 when they publicly and legally appealed a decision from the Copyright Royalty Board to raise royalty rates for songwriters on streaming platforms. Many artists and even industry members had openly expressed their disappointment in Spotify after this, and there's undoubtedly a lot to be said there. But others have expressed an alternative perspective. While Spotify was doing a disservice to the people who make the industry go round, they also were one of the biggest saviors of the industry in the first place. They recreated the paying market for music in a time of rampant music piracy. There are also people who point out how streaming has changed the game for independent artists as well. Prior to these platforms, it was essentially impossible to make a career as an artist without the hand of a major label. But today, people can be artists from home. They can reach people all over the world, while doing so 100% independently. They can do it without the harsh standards created by the industry that have been upheld for decades. One might argue that the opportunities for musicians have never been better, with the power of major labels diminishing more and more every year. So, looking at this situation again, perhaps the industry is dying, but its killer is not the internet. I may go so far as to say that the industry killed itself by gatekeeping music. In my opinion, the industry model is outdated. A formula for artist success no longer exists. The trends change so quickly that labels can barely keep up. They may have the money to keep themselves afloat, but they don't have the foresight. And that's the T. It's clear that the problem is the platform itself. It's true that they make billions off of artists, and artists in turn should be able to make a living wage. So, what's the solution? I think, honestly, we haven't come up with one yet. But many have tried, and many have made suggestions for the future. There's been some talk of a user-centric model for these streaming services instead of a pro rata model. What this means is that if I pay $9.95 per month and listen to 5 different artists in that month, the money I've paid will be distributed amongst those 5 artists rather than to the overall royalty pool. This is tricky because it changes the value of a song every single time you stream something. The users who listen to the most music provide the least amount of value per stream, which is kind of backwards and might actually hurt independent artists overall. One of the more obvious solutions is that artists can operate through sites like Bandcamp and Patreon. This way, people can choose which artists to support and can do so directly, and the result is a living wage for said artists, as well as a stronger connection between them and their supporters. The issue with that is that these sites lack the reach that platforms like Spotify and Apple Music have. Tom York explains that he believes they are directly to blame for this model not being more popular, because they get in the way by offering competitive pricing. Why would someone pay $5 to an artist directly when they could pay $9.95 a month to have unlimited music? According to Kafka of Recode.net, the revenue gained by declining piracy rates in countries that have Spotify equals the amount of money that is taken away from digital downloads. I think of this like, if you're a musician trying to book gigs to make money, and someone comes along and offers to do that same gig for beer and exposure, you're not getting the gig, and therefore you're not making any money. The demand for music is super high, and the majority of people want to access it for free or a low subscription cost. The reality here is that even though musicians can operate from their homes these days, it takes time to learn these skills, and I mean years. Not to mention the money for buying the equipment and instruments necessary to make your music sound professional enough to compete with major labels. If an independent chef took the time to learn the skills to cook incredible food, purchased the equipment and the ingredients, and then did it from home, Would you expect that food for free? The more extreme suggestion has been a socialized streaming or a tax-funded American music library. This was formally proposed by Henderson Cole in the Penny Fractions newsletter in 2019, but was discussed even back in 2003. Henderson's 2019 proposal is summarized here. My proposed solution is the American Music Library. The AML is a government-run music streaming service that every American can access for free. This streaming service will not have algorithms or service-generated playlists, but instead will be a repository for all music from all over the world. The artists and songwriters would be paid fairly when people stream their work, and no labels, publishers, or other industry figures would be able to wield power over the service or prevent anyone from hosting their music there. Along with this proposal, Penny Fractions provided a set of rules that would be more or less required for this to function. 1. No one may prevent any artist or songwriter from hosting their music on the AML. 2. Songwriters and artists can upload their work directly to the AML without the use of distributors. 3. The AML would be tax-funded, with additional ads if necessary, similar to public radio or donor drives like PBS. 4. The government will preserve the music for future generations, so that files are not deleted and lost forever, or burned, like the Universal Fire in 2020. 5. The U.S. Music Library will pay a royalty completely separate and unique from the current royalty system to artists and songwriters. This last rule is laid out in detail in this newsletter, which I highly recommend reading. It is certainly an interesting thought. Liz Pelly, who wrote about this for Real Life Mag in February of 2021, categorizes music as a public good. She believes that music, on top of being an outlet for many, many humans, stands as an archive for moments in history. It's a direct reflection and therefore record of how society is feeling and coping at any given time. Therefore, she believes that we should treat music the same way we treat books. Similar to a public library, there's no algorithm, no biases, only a repository. This service would be a user-centric model with a cap on a maximum wage. Pelly compares this idea to the Federal Music Project, which was included in the New Deal back during the Great Depression, and paid artists to write new music and provide concerts and music lessons that would be free to the public. There are actually small working examples of this structure already, in places like Canada and even in cities like Seattle, Austin, and Pittsburgh. These cities have public libraries that host local-only music streaming, which is accessible to anyone with a library card. The library pays a flat fee to the participating musicians for a 5-year license. And while there are certainly flaws and obstacles within the idea of a public American music library, it's one that gets you thinking about what the future of music really looks like. Pelly suggests that we shouldn't be looking for a one-size-fits-all fix for these problems anyway. I also encourage you to read Pelly's article, which goes way more in depth with what issues might arise on a platform like this. Here I was thinking I was going to make a video on the death of the music industry. Turns out, I learned way more from this video than I thought I would, and we as listeners and musicians have a lot to think about. What are your thoughts on all of this? Do you think artists deserve more pay? What do you think would be the most practical solution moving forward? I'd love to know all of your opinions in the comments. I want to thank you for the incredible support on this series, and I'm always looking for topic suggestions, so if there's anything specific you want to see, let me know. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to know what's coming next. Thank you so much for watching.